Thanks, everybody. It's great to be back. So I'm also here under false pretenses because I don't have answers in my presentation. So I'm here to get answers from everybody, but also to talk to you and to introduce you to this beautiful area in the Limpopo province, in which the Ebenezer Dam is situated. I just want to check, can you see the next slide? Hope it's moving. Okay, fantastic. All right. So it's a beautiful, fragile guardian, biodiversity is, and we're finally beginning to understand that biodiversity actually means safety, and that variety is what protects us, and that beauty is not just a pretty face, but it's the backbone of all that holds our environment, and therefore us, in place so that we can benefit from clean water, fresh air, food and shelter that will support us into the future. So in the Machubis Kloof, it's a really misty, really mysterious place, really cold. It has been the last few days, but it's a place that's impounded by water and divided up by mountains. It lies in the mist belt of the northern Drakensberg escarpment, and its wildlife and the wilderness in which it lives is surrounded by streams and nurtured by lots of rain. And this results in an environment that is spectacular to look at, but which also supports ecosystems, which, if they're healthy, provide services that reach far beyond just the beauty of a small little hub known as Hannesburg, where I live. So this fragile ecosystem supports the main drivers of economic development in the area, which are tourism and agriculture. And much as tourism and agriculture depend on the environment, they also disturb it to greater and lesser degrees. So mountains are vital freshwater collection and storage systems, as well as centers of biological and cultural heritage. And we have both of those in these misty mountains. And this is why in 1959, the Ebenezer Dam was built in these northern Drakensberg mountains of the escarpment in order to take advantage of the water collection services of this quaternary catchment. And we colloquially call it the Upper Letaba catchment. Its official name is B81A, but we are in the upper reaches of the Groot Letaba River. So it's fed by the Broederstroom and the Helpmekaar rivers. They rise in the Woodbush, in the Grootbos, from which the headwaters of the Groot Letaba River start. And then together with the Wilgespreid River, they enter the Ebenezer Dam. And then this is a reservoir for people, food production, industry, all the way from the Polokwane Metropole through to the Kruger National Park and down to the lowlands of Mozambique. The Polokwane Metropole, the water has to be pumped up to them, so they're upstream of us. The transformation of grassland to forestry, and more recently from forestry to commercial agriculture, on top of all our convoluted climate issues, have put the water quality and the quantity of the Ebenezer Dam and the Groot Letaba and that whole Letaba Olifants catchment at risk. So this is a little bit more of where we are. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the little red spot and the inset, the map of South Africa, is where the drainage basin of the Groot Letaba rests, and the B81A on the left-hand side of the screen is our small quaternary catchment. It's the smallest in the greater catchment of that area, but it's really important because it's the source of the Groot Letaba and that catchment. Just a few different maps for you to look at, the topographical map, which clearly shows the Ebenezer Dam, and then one or two other topographic maps to put you in the picture of what our catchment looks like. So Lepelle Water manages the Ebenezer Reservoir Dam, and it supplies approximately half of the water required by the 480,000 inhabitants of the Polokwane Metropole. And then the rest is supplied to Polokwane by the Olifant system. And this also includes rapidly expanding rural townships that just multiply. Every day we drive in that direction, there are more people building houses. It's quite extraordinary. The Groot Letaba then exits the Ebenezer Dam, goes down the Georges Valley into the Zameen Dam, and supplies that town's domestic, industrial, and agricultural water users, including its 15,000 inhabitants and their needs. It then flows through the citrus lands of Letsitele and the adjacent settlements to feed Palabora and its 13,000 people, as well as the abstraction needed for mining in that area. So afterwards, it joins the Klein Letaba in the Kruger National Park to form the Letaba River, which flows into the Olifants River before entering Mozambique and joining the Limpopo River and exiting into the Indian Ocean. It provides this entire Letaba River basin provides water for over 5,200 settlements, including those that are completely reliant on subsistence agriculture, as well as industrial and agricultural use. So it's quite an extensive number of people and industries that it has to service. So just a little bit more, a little bit of a different map showing the Broederstroom catchment and the Helpmekaar rivers, which are the two main rivers of the source of the Groot Letaba. And then a little bit of how the water is divided up between afforestation, that dark green, and then the primary use or domestic use, transfer to Polokwane is the pink, and then the ecological requirements, which are quite extensive because it has to obviously go all the way to the Kruger National Park and supply ecological requirements to that natural area. And irrigation is the highest use of all at the moment, and I don't see that changing because planted crops are increasing at the moment. And just water use in the small Ebenezer catchments itself, 60% is for urban use. And then at the present moment, and I think this is slightly out of date, forestry is 28%. However, this must be growing because when I look at how much land is being cleared, old forestry land that's being cleared and changed over to orchards, I think this number must be in quite a lot of flux. And then quite an extensive amount still utilized by all our invasive alien plants, which we are lucky enough to have in our area, so many. So that's its use. And then the amount of water is predicted, or the discharge that we're getting from the rivers is predicted to decrease by 30% by 2050. So we really do have quite a lot of work to do before that time to make sure we have enough water in our system. It's already changed since the 1950s when a lot of dams and other water abstraction processes were increased. It morphed from a permanent river to a perennial river. And then some studies have been conducted. Most of them have been conducted downstream from the Ebenezer Dam rather than in our catchments at the top of the dam, above the dam. So the condition of the headwaters and their surrounding environment have been mostly ignored. The last state of the rivers report classed the Broederstroom as a C-grade river. So it's really not in pristine state, which is how you would ideally like your headwaters to be. So, and it's particularly due to habitats that are not integrated and that are disrupted and fragmented, natural habitats, as well as there's quite a lot of turbidity in the water, which ironically causes barriers to our exotic trout. And so they don't thrive very well because they have these, every now and then, these turbid barriers they can't get through. So there are some upsides. But formal monitoring and compliance are very scarce. We do not fall under a water users association at the moment. If there's time, we can talk more about that. There's scanty compliance as well as law enforcement around water issues and licenses in the area. And this is something that if we're going to watch out for our water quantity, we're going to have to look at that seriously and look into getting more formal compliance going. Then also, so this is basically compromising the source of the Ebenezer catchment and then compromising it all the way downstream. So in the last 5 years, we've seen a huge change in land use in our area. It's been, you cannot ignore it. There's been a land use change from forestry to agriculture, and usually in the form of planted avocado orchards, also some blueberries and kiwi fruit. So the pine and gum plantations that predominated the land use patterns until now have changed, and we've got large scale orchards. It's easy to see where they happen. The entire plantation is cleared, the topsoil is moved, furrows and ridges are dug. they used to be dug downhill, straight down to the dam or the rivers, which we were horrified to see because of our huge rainfall amounts, which we were worried this would wash all the silt into the river. However, they have started planting them more along the contour lines. It was due to the fact that avos need quite a high sunlight ratio. So the north-south slopes were good for maximizing sunlight, but really bad for siltation washing into the rivers. And forestry had predominated till then, so the risks to the catchment were well documented for this land use, but we have very little idea of what the increase in orchards is going to do. So 200 years ago, our catchment was covered with 3 natural vegetation types. It was the woodbush granite grasslands, which are basically the foothills of the Volkberg and down almost into the bushveld. And then northern mistbelt forest were in the folds of the hills and in the river valleys, protected from a fire and also forming fire breaks in a way. And then the other grassland is the Volkberg Dolomite grassland, which is on the upper slopes of the Volkberg Mountains and is well represented in the Volkberg Nature Reserve. So these natural vegetation types acted as a huge sponge, which collected and siphoned water off the slopes and down into the rivers for storage. And even in 1948, the role of this natural vegetation was recognized, despite the fact that some of it was already transferred or transformed rather. So sorry, let me go back up. Where are we? In this narrow strip of high rainfall, scarcely more than a score miles wide, nature over a period of thousands of years has established a natural reservoir. All the water lavished from the enshrouding pall of mist and clouds, gently dripping from the leaves of an unbroken canopy of forest trees, quietly running down and entering the sponge of undergrowth, moss, leaf mold, and porous earth, rich in absorptive humus. And also in the unspoiled grasslands, myriads of roots and rootlets conduct the rainwater downwards. And though the soil is completely shaded from the sun's desiccating rays, slowly the water works its way into a network of streamlets and streams, uniting to form the rivers that lead the life-giving moisture far out of the mountain catchments into the arid lowveld for the benefit of plant, beast, and man. So this is what's kind of supposed to be happening, but is probably not happening to that extent anymore. And then again in 1990, Von den Busch and Coombs wrote in the South African Forestry Journal, the primary management objective for the Groot Natuurreservaat is the maintenance of species diversity and the sustained yield of high quality water. So back then people recognized it, and we recognize even more in the face of droughts and our current water shortages, how important this area is to keep its biodiversity intact. The gold was discovered in 1880 on the slopes of the Iron Crown, and this changed the area forever. And at the same time, indigenous forests were being utilized for wood for the growing towns on the Highveld of Polokwane, Pretoria, and Johannesburg. And contrary, apparently, to other countries, our indigenous hardwoods take a long time to grow, much longer than the pine and gum that were in 1910 starting to be imported and grown in our mountains as plantations. Because they were faster growing than our indigenous forests, and forestry people were worried about the negative impact that the forestry industry was having on our indigenous forests. So in just over 120 years, pine and gum transformed the grasslands and forests into regular rows of monocultures. The forests were less badly impacted than the grasslands. Grasslands were seen as unimproved veld or unimproved vegetation. So they were improved by adding pines and gums. And so now we have a bit of a problem with our grasslands. And the loss of biodiversity has been critical. Less than 1% of the woodbush granite grassland remains in our environment. There's very, very little of this vegetation type. It's critically endangered. The forests are in better condition, being protected in the Volkberg Wilderness area, and they also distributed over a larger area. And the Volkberg Dolomite grassland, as I said before, is also better protected. That we have a real struggle with the Volkberg granite grassland. So the conversion to pine and gum obviously caused a great decrease in biodiversity in exactly the areas where our biodiversity is crucial for water management. There are over 120 endemic plant species that occur in the Volkberg Center of endemism. And sadly, the red data lists are also growing. And they include the blue swallow, which we haven't seen for, I think, over 10 years on our grasslands, the Cape parrot, which is much more stable a population. And now we have a Cape parrot working group who are doing a whole lot of work on looking at the distribution and the biology of this special bird. The northern forest rain frog, the population seems to be stable. And then the Volkberg Zulu butterfly is a tiny remnant of its original population and is seemingly on the verge of extinction. It's really, really vulnerable at the moment. Eastwood's long-tailed ceps is extinct, as is Nephofia crecipes, one of the red hot pokers, partly due to our dam in the area that destroyed some habitat of that ceps. So grassland vegetation is extremely vulnerable to any disturbance and is the least likely vegetation type in our area to recover. Apart from biodiversity loss, the reduction of water yield from a catchment is the greatest reported impact of forestry on the environment. So here are some of our red-listed endangered endemic creatures. I won't go through them all, but the little butterfly, that golden, yellow, and black butterfly, is the Volkberg Zulu. And we are on the verge of getting a conservation servitude declared for that butterfly, which is really, really exciting, but comes with its own stresses and problems, which we'll talk about a little later. Then if anyone wants to visit our forests and our grasslands and look out for Nephofia crassifolia, we would absolutely be so happy to find that again. But we are pretty convinced that it's now extinct in our area, or extinct, basically. And the blue swallow, not extinct, but definitely does not visit our area anymore. Any birders out there, please come and help us look for it. And that poor little sad crinkled up specimen is the Eastwood's long-tailed ceps, which again we keep an eye out for, but we have very little hope of finding again. So we talked about 2018 land use patterns shifting, and they were driven by a global demand for this new superfruit of avocado pears, and also because our mountains give the growing season, will increase the growing season because they ripen later if they're higher up the mountain, and new cultivars were developed that could survive our cold climate. And so this has seen an absolute upsurge in the planting of avocados on our mountain slopes. So they brought their own challenges, such as fences. The pine plantations didn't need to be fenced for security reasons or for keeping out little bokkies that like the tasty new trees. So we now have fences which impact on migration routes and are sometimes also electrified. So that adds another layer of challenge. Pesticides, fertilizers, irrigation and siltation are all new challenges to deal with on the mountain that weren't necessarily occurring with just the pine and the gum that we saw. And then it's not all doom and gloom. The avo industry does bring jobs. It brings large agribusinesses with the potential for supporting conservation initiatives. And there's not many people who have much free money around. And so it's important to be able to have funding for conservation initiatives. So there are potential upsides to this new business on the mountain. So as we said, monocultures of pine and gum are biodiversity impoverished, and they're problematic in the catchment because they disrupt the resilient water regulation system of the area. However, the commercial agribusinesses have transformed hundreds of hectares into just bare ground in the process of changing from forest to agribusiness. So the land lies bare for a while, and if this is done during the rainy season, there's a huge potential for siltation to occur. In addition, no studies are available in our area for the potential negatives of this industry. So the effect of perpendicular furrows on siltation in the rivers hasn't been measured. We can imagine what would happen, but one needs to have some proper results and scientific studies done around that. Nor do we know how much fertilizer will be needed, what pesticides will be used, which herbicides are important, and how much will run off into the water source, and then what these will do to our water and our macroinvertebrates. Effects on fences we need to have some kind of measure on, and we don't even have a baseline measurement and observation for how things were before the avos arrived. So it's very difficult to measure the effect that having this new crop on the mountain has on the environment. The effect of irrigation versus plantation is gets people hot under the collar, because one irrigates avocado pears, but everybody knows that gums are notorious for drinking large amounts of water, even if you're not irrigating them, with sprayers, etc. So that hasn't been measured. It needs to be measured for our area. But we also don't know anything much about the potential positives. We don't know the effect on tourism. At present, it's interesting because many of our plantations that were freely available for people to walk through are now blocked by fences. So that's one probably negative effect. However, there's also increased safety in the area. So that could be a positive. There are a number of new jobs created, and our economy is incredibly stressed at the moment. We've lost one of our biggest employers of labor in the area with a lumber mill that has closed. So many people have lost their jobs. Many people are desperate for work. So that is an absolute positive for this to this industry. And then again, I mentioned the positive conservation offsets that might occur. So when one changes forestry land into orchards or into agriculture for crops, the legislation states that you need to offset some of what was forestry and change and restore it back to, as far as possible, what was there before. I don't know how you do that with grassland. Apparently can't be done in our lifetime. So this is an opportunity for learning. But it means that there's potential to try and get corridors between pristine areas of natural grassland with these restored patches that used to be pine and gum, because by law you're not supposed to convert your entire plantation to orchards. Unfortunately, we don't have much law enforcement or many compliance officers in our area, so how much this actually happens, we also don't know, and we need to look at that. Sadly, development is much quicker than research, and conservation often happens after the fact, after you realize you've lost something. So we were all running around like, I don't know, it was chickens when our dam was getting emptier and emptier and emptier. So that is a picture of our wonderful empty dam in 2018. And that's when everyone gets scared, and then we have rain again and the dam fills up and we forget that we were worried about the drought. But we just need to look at Joburg and the new water shifting term that seems to have now usurped load shedding in our terminology, and think about whether we want this in our catchment. So we are blessed with 3 times the amount of rain, at least, as the Highveld. We get at least 1,000 millimeters and even more in some parts of the catchment. So, but this means that we need, and we have a responsibility to manage this well. And we'd have many challenges. One of them is our poor overworked government and the glitches that occur. So the picture on the left is a piece of grassland in the foreground, and then pines in the background, and some funny white blobs in the background, which constitute a road that went through our nature reserve, our Woodbush Granite Grassland Nature Reserve. The road was there, but it needed to be upgraded. However, due process was not followed, and this was partly due to governments not having the capacity to, first of all, understand the ecological drivers on the grassland, and to understand their own environmental impact assessment laws. And so quite a bit of that grassland was damaged, and it is irreparable. It is a grassland. It won't recover in our lifetimes. We're going to have to put a lot of work in to ensure that no alien invasives then move from that road site into the rest of the grassland. The development and jobs versus environment conundrum. So we have a lot of landowners and businesses in the area who are really keen to do conservation work. However, they don't necessarily, that's not all they do. They also have to make a profit. They also have to find ways of running their businesses. And so we have interesting conundrums like charcoal plants in places where they shouldn't be, as well as little nature reserves that are about to be proclaimed, all on the same land and with the same person. So it's very hard being in between with a carrot and a stick and trying to get people to talk about conservation when they're also trying to make a profit. Really, really tricky. Then the slow time frames that occur around alien invasive clearing because it's difficult to access funding. And then volunteers are, many people are very, very interested in volunteering, but they don't have the time, or they start off on the project really enthusiastically, and then things happen and they move off and the project goes bang and we can't finish it. And then again, seasonal aspects, particularly because we have quite a high rainfall in summer, and so it sometimes gets really tricky to do field work on our interesting roads because we can't access some of the spaces, etc. Again, lack of knowledge. There's a whole lot of research out there. You'd think that we have enough to go on and put it into action, but we don't know what to do about the fire regime, for example, on our proto butterfly reserve, because absolutely it needs fire. It's a piece of grassland, but it's a remnant population of butterflies, and we don't know if butterflies just expired in a fire and were recruited from another site, but this little butterfly can't be recruited from another site because that is the only site. So do we keep the fire out? We think we should, but the grassland needs fire, so we don't know. That's just a little example of how much research we need to do and don't have. And then we have no coordinating body. We have a couple of NGOs, the Friends of the Haenesburg Grassland and the Mountain Environmental Watch, both of whom have very little funding and very little capacity and are doing it on a voluntary basis. We don't have sort of a lovely government organization in charge of everything, kind of with a lot of money telling us what we can and can't do, and making sure that everyone toes the line and follows the legislation. So we have volunteers who try to do as much as they can when they can. And so that also causes actions to be delayed. And then in terms of both the forestry industry as well as the agriculture industry, I've noticed that people and landowners get accreditation fatigue. There are so many hoops that agriculture have to jump through in order to get their accreditation that sometimes they just throw up their hands and go, we can't do it. And again, it's a case of the stick and the carrot. So European markets want unblemished, beautiful fruit. To get your unblemished, beautiful fruit, you have to use certain pesticides, certain herbicides, but you're not allowed to use those pesticides and herbicides in terms of the accreditations that people need in order to export them. So the agricultural industry does often just throw up its hands and go, well, we'll do whatever we can do because we need to make a profit and we can't satisfy everybody. And then often the environment is the one that suffers. So market forces compared to environment is a challenge. So what we're doing now at the moment, these are all very ad hoc projects, and one takes precedence over another depending on who's interested in what and how many volunteers there are and where the money is. The first project that we started on was to map our upper Letaba catchment, and we wanted to have a handle on where are all the little untransformed patches of either forest or grassland, because pieces would disappear and we wouldn't even know that we had a piece of grassland until somebody said, oh, there's a bulldozer there and they're trashing this, and we'd go and look and it was a piece of grassland, but it had been trashed. So we realized we didn't have a handle on what we have. And the idea is to map using satellite imagery, aerial photography, just to get a desktop idea of what's out there, and then to go and verify it. It's very, very time consuming. And then the other key thing to do is to look at conservation servitudes, or we started off wanting to have conservancies and wanting to get them gazetted through LIDET. And that is incredibly time consuming and tedious and takes forever. We haven't really been successful with one. So now we're looking at just going the conservation servitude route, which is a really low level of protection, but at least it's a start. And it's, we think, much quicker than going through our provincial conservation authority. And then the other really crucial in terms of the water thing to get off the ground is a water users association for this Letaba catchment. So we have the opportunity to either create a new water users association or to join an existing one. And we're trying to get all the legislation around joining the Letaba Water Users Association dealt with and through, so that we can finally have a little bit more control over water licenses and abstraction and an understanding of what's going on with the quantity of the water as well as the quality in our catchment. And then really important is information dissemination, because people are so keen to do the environmentally correct thing, but not everybody even knows which alien plants are important in the area and what a bugweed looks like and which plants are critically endangered, etc. So we've realized that we have a huge job just to get information out there to people who are keen. So we do WhatsApp groups, we have talks, we have farmers meetings, we attend trade functions, whatever it takes to get some of these messages out. And then fortunately, we have a university close by, so we're finally starting to link some of the questions that we need answered to student projects. And we're hopefully starting an MSc on the Broederstroom River and the riverine corridors, and what state they are in the next, it'll start next year. So we'll get some research done around some of the key questions we have. And then iNaturalist has been a wonderful platform for young people. I'm so terrible at it, but getting people out into the grasslands and taking photographs and putting them on iNaturalist, they get to learn the different organisms that are out there. And of course, that feeds into SANBI's checklists and data that they use for distribution analysis. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful tool to get not just young people, anybody out into our grasslands and our forests and learning about what's out there. And then I'm so happy to see Marie Thinker is here, because we have a vital collaboration with K2C, Kruger to Canyon. We're on their doorstep. We form part of the Biosphere Reserve, but we're quite far away from the core center. And so it's been really helpful for us to collaborate with some of the staff from K2C and learn from them how they've managed some of the amazing work and projects they do in that area. So sourcing funding, we have been absolutely hopeless at. There's a lot of potential. There's mining offsets. There's beverage companies that need to do the right thing with water. There's a whole lot of potential, and we haven't managed to actually access any of it. So we need somebody with that funding gene to come and help us. And then the last little thing to talk about is the healers on the rivers and the ceremonies that happen along our riverbanks, which are, I think, vital. The ceremonies that get conducted either with traditional healers or with some of the churches in the area connect people to rivers. They connect people to why they're important. They give people space and a feeling of sanctuary. However, they don't always end up great for the river, because people have lost connection with how to look after these wild spaces. So we find quite a lot of junk being left behind. And it isn't just about the ceremonies. It's anybody who walks into these natural areas and hasn't been wrapped over the knuckles as a kid about dropping litter or destroying them. We just have a conundrum. How do we get people into these places? It's really important to have them there. It's vital. But how do we also make sure that the environment isn't degraded and trashed when we're doing this awareness and this work of getting people out there? So these are just some of the information that's out there, projects that have been done, research that's around, that I'm not going to go into because it'll be tedious, but just to say that it's not all doom and gloom. It's not that we know nothing. There have been a lot of wonderful projects and information out there. It's to try to collate it all and to read through it all and to see, oh, we mustn't do this project because it's already been done. And that is quite a challenge. Lots of organizations that are working in the area. So it's not like we are all alone. This is just biodiversity and how to ensure that it is safeguarded. And as I said before, we're trying to follow the stewardship route. The map on the right is just an example of, or just to show how much we've lost of the wood bush granite grassland. So the dark patches of green are the extent remaining, and the light patches of green were the original extent of this grassland fragment now. And so we have a lot of work to do to connect up those green spaces. And what we are worried about is this was a desktop study. This was not people going out there and verifying what was on the ground. So we are very sure that there is even less than what is shown on the map left over of these spaces. So this is the mapping problem that we're working on at the moment. Just how to get this onto a map and how to get us out there in the field verifying it, because otherwise we're going to be losing these critical pieces. So the project is to look at orthophotos and satellite imagery, anything we can get to get a desktop study going. I wasn't doing it. Vincent Egan was doing the segmentation, and he decided, no, that's a whole lot of waste of time. So the segmentation skip has been left out. He's just digitizing the maps, and it takes a long time. It's really tedious. And then after that, we go out and verify it, check what the ecological condition of those patches of forest and grassland are, and give them a grading. And that's the fun part, because then you get out into the field and you learn, you get a whole lot of surprising lessons. So that information then would feed into any kind of stewardship programs that we try to get off the ground. At the moment, we are just happy if a landowner goes, oh, look, I have this forest and I think it's in a good state and I'd love to get involved in a stewardship program. So we're not even necessarily looking at the map to see what would be strategic. I'm kind of at the point where if anyone wants to look after any piece of natural environment, just help them, support them. That's wonderful. So yeah, I just wanted to end with this little saying by Wendell Berry: there are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. And I hope that through awareness and these projects that we're doing, the desecrated places can once again become sacred and feel sacred, and help us connect with what's helping us to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Thank you for giving us another very, very insightful lecture. I just want to thank you for sharing this with us. It's a great pity that we don't have the student component with us tonight. We trust that they are studying because they are writing exams. But this is such a classic illustration of how all systems are linked, and you cannot conserve the precious water resources without conserving the blue swallow and the Volkberg Zulu butterflies. So all these things are interlinked, and it's beautifully illustrated. And I love that you also right at the end brought in the spiritual aspect of it. And I have quite a few questions to ask, but I will save them for the Q&A. And now I'm going to hand over to Marty to please handle that.
Cool. Yeah, so thanks, I'll add my thanks, Bronwyn, for awesome talk. And very, very, very interesting. And as Johan said, the way that everything is linked together, it's just incredible. So thanks for enlightening us some more. I don't see we have many questions in the chat, or there's one that's just popped up now. So I'll ask the question. I don't know, Sophia, if you want to ask your own question, we can unmute you, or if you were happy for me to read your question.
Thank you, Martin Jasper, for this great time. I'm very much thankful for the whole talk. My question is about how is the plastic pollutant state in the rivers along the catchment area? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. And it's an absolutely important question. We are really lucky. We do have pollution. A lot of it is plastic. A lot of it is at sites that people have discovered, strangely or not strangely, since COVID. So we didn't used to have many visitors in some of the more secluded places, but people are desperate to get out. And so we have sometimes taxi groups of people coming to waterfalls or places on the river that are fairly close to the road. And so in the last probably 5 years, we've been seeing a lot more pollution in the area. And it's a case of people want to get out there, and people are aware that they feel good in these places, but people bring plastic. So we have not put up signs at the moment, but it's a first start that we're going to have to do. And often people come from outside a community. So in the community, it's really easy to do awareness programs, and we can do it with the schools and the tourists and the people. But if it's people coming through for a day from outside a community, it's really, really hard to engage with them about how to stop the plastic pollution. Yeah, so it's not bad yet. It's not terrible, but it is there.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, Sophia. I think Dr. Anuka, I think it is, has written a question in the chat, but I'd like to ask her to actually unmute herself, and then we can get her to ask her question live. That would be great. Thanks, Dr. Anuka.
So thank you, Martin, and thank you, Brownie Egan, for showing us this very good example. And I'm working on similar challenges, but as a part of, like developing country level carbon calculator. And I wondered whether you did any carbon calculations, because nowadays farm carbon calculator is very much in fashion, and also so the idea for us is to use that carbon calculator to change the whole practices and processes, and also educate people and so on. So we have 4 concepts in this carbon calculator, like carbon budgeting, that is reducing carbon emissions, while also looking at carbon mobilizing, that is where we can also use agriculture for sequestarians and so on, so we can mobilize the carbon, as well as carbon literacy, so that we can make them understand which practices increase carbon emission or decrease carbon emission and so on. And it can be within the related areas of agriculture and pastures and livestock, like such as energy use, water use, land use, and so on. And also the biodiversity. And the final is like carbon sustainability. So how we can sustain our life having low carbon and so on. So that is where we are going. And many countries actually, or many sectors, I mean, not sectors, but different areas of agriculture and food industry have shown their interest, and especially cooperatives, where we want to focus, so that, we don't have to rely on finance so much. We can bring their resources to their use and so on. So can you tell me more on anything or advise me on this thing? Thank you.
Thanks, Renuka.
Thank you so much. This is a really vital piece of the puzzle, and it's just been on the periphery of our thoughts at the moment, but definitely there. There's a private NGO, and the name has slipped my mind, but I will remember and send it to you somehow. But they are working not directly in our area, but one of their employees is based here. So they look at carbon credits and education and projects that they can get landowners to do. So he has been saying to me, we need to get together and talk. So no, we haven't done the work yet, but yes, there's an opportunity. Then I was wondering, just recently, because there has been some conflict around charcoal plant in the area, and I've been trying to find out, is it possible to reduce those emissions so that you don't let the rest of that carbon out into the atmosphere? Because it does seem to be one way of utilizing the black wattle and the gums and the aliens that we're trying to clear in the area. But is this feasible? I know nothing about carbon, I know nothing about charcoal plants, but I would love to know more. I'm sure there is a way of doing this. And then the other thing was that when I discovered that the underground biomass of a grassland is a wonderful carbon sink, I didn't realize how great it was, even when compared with forests. I was thinking, well, if you're changing pine and gum over to grassland, even if it's not, as biodiverse as the original pristine grassland, surely that has an implication with the carbon. And what happens is there more carbon then stored in these sort of like secondary grasslands compared to a pine or a gum plantation? How does the carbon work there? So we started asking questions, but no, we haven't done any research. We're really at the beginning of it. And I'm very sure that the companies, the big agri companies, would be extremely interested in this kind of thing, and they would have the capacity. So that is a plus for having big agric on the mountain. They would have the capacity to look at these things and take it up.
Yeah, thank you. You have given very practical examples where we can use this carbon calculator. And I am working, actually, I've just posted that I am a founder of Global Sustainable Futures Progress Partnership Network. And I have 6,000 coordinators around 165 countries. And so we are not only academics, actually we started in this initiative to empower early career researchers. And so it was focused on academics. So we do have most universities and academics with us, but we also have businesses and, agriculturists and many other businesses with us. And having that capacity, we are looking into all localities to bring a consortium together. So of course, I started a bit late and I did not get the hold of the location you were working. So can you please tell me which location you were working?
Yeah, we're in the Limpopo province, so the northern part of South Africa, and we are in the northeastern section, not right up north, on the Letaba River, the Groot Letaba River, at the headwaters of it. So in the Magubuskloof area, close to Zanin. The closest town is Zanin, Tzaneen.
Okay, I am no wise in this, but sure, I think if you send me some information on location, maybe we can find some good partners in that area, and we can work on this. The reason I say I'm very confident that we will be able to work because we have UK Farm Carbon Calculator already being established since more than 10 years now. And we are getting tremendous response to it. And it is actually now working in 4 continents, in the sense of one of the country has taken up in Asia and other continents. And the lady who is the CEO of that, she is so much interested in making it global. And so we have very tremendous, powerful, partners to move this forward. It's all about us then making a consortium from universities. Even the PhD students can help us and synthesizing this movement, saying that yes, agriculture can change our lifestyle because it touches everyone in the whole world, isn't it? And so we can do that. So thank you very much. I will stop here and I will allow others to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think it's the start of a future relationship and working together. So thank you very much. And this is, I think, very much what LCA is all about, building up those networks and those contacts with each other. So I hope this does go forward. And thanks very much, Renuka, for your questions. I'm going to ask Johan to unmute himself. And thanks for your patience. As you know, the family goes last. So if you can ask your question.
Thanks, Marty. So, Bronwyn, I have a personal social ecology question for you. How and why did you get involved with this? It's always interesting to me to see conservationists moving after nature to conserve it, or did they observe a problem where they are and they got hands-on involved? Like we have Roland Goods in the audience tonight. He's in Angola. He didn't start out in Angola, so he followed the problem to Angola. So I'm just curious to see how did this work out for you?
I'm trying to remember. I moved to Johannesburg from Polokwane, which is a metropole, and I really don't like cities. And that was about 10 years ago, and I loved it because it was empty and open, and there were mountains and beautiful streams, and it felt untouched after Polokwane. And it wasn't, obviously. It had fir trees and blue gums all over the place, but that was okay. And then when in 2018 we started seeing I really don't like, I mean, this isn't a pointing finger kind of a thing, but we just started seeing hillsides being being excavated in a way, and just going on a huge scale and wondering what was going on with the wildlife because of the fences. That was kind of our first warriors. All these fences going up everywhere in a place that used to, where animals could just kind of run free. And you know what was going on with our beautiful, what we thought was pristine water, it clearly wasn't. And I've looked at the literature that was done before that. It was already impacted, but we were so worried about the silt and the pesticides and herbicides that we perceived would be going into the water with the agriculture companies moving up. And so by then Johannesburg felt like home. And so I think that's why I shifted my research interest to more social ecology rather than just edible insects resource management, because it was a place that I call home that was being changed. And at first we basically just wanted to protest and toy and stop the companies. But the more we delved into the issues, the more we realized that we all need to eat. We all love avos, actually. And we were very concerned about the lack of employment in the environment, which comes with its own environmental issues. So it just became so complicated. The small group of us that were worried went from wanting to lie down in front of bulldozers in a very short time to going, well, that's not going to actually stop this, because like 5 people lying in front of a bulldozer is not going to do anything, to trying to look at this very, very complex problem from more angles. Unfortunately, it just seemed to get more and more complicated. We don't have any solutions. But yeah, it was from feeling like your home has been destroyed.
Wow. Bronwyn, if I can throw in a follow-up question. In terms of the farmers in the area, is it you know, you observing a major change from forestry to agriculture? Are there positives as well? Are there farmers who are on board with conservation, or which way does this fall?
Yes, and that's why it got so difficult and challenging, because there are almost everybody everybody I've spoken to from the commercial farming side, as well as the generational farmers who were always on the mountain and who might have just been switching on a small scale to orchards. Everyone is concerned about the environment in some way or another, whether it's from a water point of view or an aesthetics point of view, and people will say, well, we don't know what to do. We're not making money on the pines. We need to switch to orchards. But they get the fruit gets stolen. We don't know what else to do other than fences. We don't have any other solutions. If you guys can come up with a solution, we'll try to implement it if it's cost effective. So we are trying very much to talk with one another, but unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I don't know, but greenies do have a bad rap for, you know, just wanting to stop stuff without trying to find solutions together. So it took quite a while for people to sit together and talk. So now we have a group of agriculturists who sit with a group of researchers and scientists who sit with a group of people who are generational farmers, and with people who are farming sort of in the more conventionally sustainable way. So we have some farms in the area that are doing no hormone pigs or free range chickens or Swiss cheese in a completely like 200 years, 300 years old manner, and people are sitting together and talking. But we're not coming up with anything practical at the moment, anything that's actually happening, other than this one little reserve that's almost signed off, other than an amazing commercial avo farmer who is really intense about transferring his section of pines that he needs to get back to grassland. I mean, he's like phoning us and asking us what kind of indigenous grass seeds we can put there. How do we change it? And we have no idea. We've never done this before. So he's the guy that's going to go and do the work and experiment and try. And we can all watch and see what happens and learn from him. So as scientists, we realize that we are not the ones that are going to be doing the actual work here. We need the farmers to be on board, because they're the ones that are going to do the work. So, and it needs to be commercial farmers, because they're the ones that have a bigger profit margin and can afford to experiment. The smaller operations just can't afford to do that. So yeah, there are positives, lots of positives.
Thanks, Johan, and thanks, Bronwyn, for your answer. I see Liesel's got her hand up, so I'm going to ask her to unmute. Liesel, and turn on your camera.
Good evening. I don't know why the camera is not on. It's a long video. Apologies. But Ron, when you mentioned the iNaturalist, and we've experienced a little bit of it with stuff that we're doing also in the Free State. How easy or friendly easy is that thing, and what will be the way to go to use iNaturalist, because it is actually a very, very powerful thing to use.
Yeah, it's great. Personally, I think it is very easy because I actually registered. I'm a technophobe. I'm a complete, as you saw when I panicked at the beginning. I'm really, really bad with phones and screens. So I managed to register. I've got some observations on there. I think it's really exciting because you put your plants or your animals up and you get an answer, and it does cut out a lot of time and a lot of fun, because it's really fun trying to work through the field guides and figure out what plants or animal you've got, and it also sticks in your head better that way, for me anyway, rather than just getting an answer from an expert. However, I managed the Larry Leach herbarium, and I've changed from coming back from field trips with hordes and hordes of specimens and then taking literally months to identify them all, to being able to then use iNaturalist to help us identify them. I am still terrible at it. My students are so much better. So I don't teach the students how to use it because I'm just rubbish at teaching them technology. So my students learned how to use it from a workshop that I organized. At least I organized the workshop with Sandy, and then they teach each other, and they're fantastic. So there's a student that I know who is actually a parasitologist. He did fish studies and parasitology work. He's a zoologist. However, he got so excited about the plants that he got a prize for the most iNaturalist observations. He knows some of the plants better than I do. He's really self-taught himself together with iNaturalist and some of the field guides to use this tool. And so the positives are that you don't need a library of field books that cost a fortune and take you forever to go through. And you get quick identifications generally, and that you're contributing to this larger database in a citizen science way. The downsides are that, for me, the names don't stick in my head as much. Also, I do still have concerns about rare and endangered plants being on iNaturalist, because I know that as soon as it gets identified, the locality gets hidden. But there is a window period where that plant or animal is sitting there. It's hard to find because it doesn't have a label, so it doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a tag, whatever. So it would still be difficult for a poacher or whoever, somebody of nefarious intent, to find it. But there is a chance. So I have a slight niggle around, like, how do you protect these things? On the other hand, if people are not excited about something and learning about something, they're not going to know about it, they're not going to protect it either. So I think the positives outweigh the negatives. And I love the fact that it gets young people out into the environment. Even if they're looking at the environment through a screen, they're still there, and they're out there and taking note of what's going on. Yeah, I enjoy it.
Thanks, Prof. Liesel. I've got a question from my side, if I can ask you. Just you had mentioned, I think it was the Climpnofolia cassia something or other. Sorry to not get that 100% right. But basically, from what you were saying, it's almost extinct in that area in the wild. And I was wondering whether there is opportunity to try and reintroduce or actually have local nurseries within protected areas in Heinertsburg or whatever. I mean, is that a plausible thing? And then replanting in the wild areas or the transformed areas back into grassland, is that a viable option, or is it just going to be poached out again? Because I'm guessing they've disappeared because of ornamental plants and that sort of sales, and I'm not too sure.
So for that particular species, no, it hasn't. I don't want to say the wrong thing. It hasn't been seen for ages, for like more than 30 years, as far as I remember. I might be wrong, and I will go and check. But for that particular plant, it seems to be habitat destruction. So it it was a woodbush granite grassland specialist. It only occurred in woodbush granite grassland. There's like these handkerchief-sized pieces left, and we think that it might have also been impacted by the dam, and there were 2 dams in the area. So as far as we know, it was habitat destruction that caused its extinction, and it's extinct in the wild, and it's not found in nurseries, or it's not found anywhere. It's gone. So it's a wonderful plant to go looking for. It's a wonderful species to have as a reason to go and look in remote areas of grassland. But that's as much as we can do at the moment for that particular plant. However, there are a suite of other grassland plants from that vegetation type that are endemic or rare or only found in this area, even if they might be found in other particular vegetation types, that do absolutely need to be placed into nurseries and their seeds propagated and or cuttings taken. And that is one of the things, I didn't even put up one of the many things that we would love to do. We don't have a nursery that is cultivating indigenous grassland forbs. So the grasses would probably come back, although we should probably cultivate those as well. But the forbs and the bulbs and the little herby things, we need to have a dedicated nursery to just those things. There's enough stuff going on with the forest, not enough. There's trees that
adequate.
We can propagate. There's adequate. Yeah, there's like at least something. You can go and get trees to put in the forest. But for the grassland specialist forbs, there's nothing. There's nobody doing that work. In Polokwane, there's a couple, Connie and Gideon, who are amazing. So they are doing some of those plants, but they're looking at indigenous plants for the whole of Limpopo. So we need like a dedicated place for that particular vegetation types plants to be grown. Yes, you're right.
And the Campflolia, is it a bulb type thing, or is it seeds? Or I mean, is there a chance that there are seeds around at least that may germinate? Or
there might be. It is an underground bulb. It's a red hot poker. So we're kind of just hoping that some remnant of it is hanging on somewhere in some piece of grassland that we haven't discovered yet. But it is pretty highly unlikely because there's so few patches left and the area that is so small. But yeah, we keep looking. So you don't know. We can hope.
Leslie Cornish has a related question. Does the Campflolia get affected by fire?
It's a grassland species, so it would have probably the upper parts would have burnt and it would have regenerated from its bulb. I don't know if it's a bulb or a rhizome. I feel like a terrible botanist. This is when I wear my zoology hat. But it would have been adapted to a fire regime because it's definitely a grassland plant. So at the underground, whatever bulb rhizomes would have kept it going. And possibly the seeds needed smoke to regenerate. I would have to look at the other Niphofias, the other red hot pokers to see. Because of course, whatever works for them possibly could work for this one. So yeah, I don't know. You don't know much about it.
So Pierre has a question that he's asked in the chat. Is the indigenous knowledge and citizen science recognized in the catchment or community?
Yes, goodness, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't even mention it, which is totally remiss. So one of the ways that we got formal recognition, gazetting of the small nature reserve that we do have gazetted was because traditional healers use that piece of grassland to collect bulbs and herbs and whatever. So even though it's a gazetted nature reserve and it's formally protected, the healers are still allowed to use it. You're still allowed to collect bulbs for medicinal reasons. And we have a list of the people they are helping us in terms of identifying plants and collecting their knowledge and teaching us about the plants in the area as well. So we had Pete Mokwela come and give us this brilliant talk, but we actually want to take him out into the field with a group of people, not just sit and watch the slides in a hall. So yes, absolutely, it's really vital. And that's why we would love to somehow get the people that are using the rivers as ceremony or ceremonial spots, as sacred sites, to also kind of join this community. it's vital.
Cool, thanks. Maret did also put in the chat, so that was a link to a previous talk that was done by Professor William Bond, who's famous for grassland and knowledge and whatever. So I think that's, again, another network point that possibly you could connect with and may be able to give you some more information about species within the grasslands and some of the strategy for conversion of the exotic forest species back into the grassland. So you mentioned there's a farmer who's passionate about doing that, and possibly, I'm not sure whether there's an opportunity to talk to Professor William Bond on that.
Yeah, thank you. My goodness, I haven't heard that name since my undergrad days. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Then one of the questions that I'd actually had before you sort of answered it, but just to sort of make sure I got it clearly, I mean, which is worse from a water use point of view, the exotic forestry or the avos? And I think it was the answer that you gave was it's still to be measured. So again, is it a study that someone needs to do in a PhD or in a master's or some sort of a thing there? But
Yeah.
I think you also mentioned that the water requirements for the avo trees is irrigation. And I'm just intrigued how they get it up the mountain. I mean, surely that's quite a feat, because normally with the like on the Limpopo River with the citrus orchards, the farms that are right on the river benefit, and everything further away it doesn't really. So I mean, I think these farms are quite far away from the actual river, aren't they?
Well, luckily for them, we're in a really water-rich area. So there's lots of tributaries, there's lots of little streams, but it would be rivers, the Helpmekaar, the Broederstroom, and then the Letaba itself after it exits the Ebenezer Dam. But they would be abstracting from rivers and from the dam itself. And this is where the Water Users Association is vital, because we don't know how much is getting extracted and for use on whatever, whether it's vegetable gardens or your home use or whatever. There are no water. There are very, very few water use licenses that are up to date and that are being checked, etc. So there's a grey area at the moment in the catchment. So I think one of the reasons that avos moved up the mountain was because we're water rich. And yeah, even if you're not quite right next to a river, there'll be you could stick a borehole down. You could definitely it's more chance of getting water up here than down in Letaba, where it's dry bushveld. So I don't think the water issue is difficult on the tops of the mountains, yes, but they're not right on the top, so they're more on the slopes. And then what's worse, pine, gum, alien invasives, or orchards? We don't know. And we've been asking this question since 2018, and getting the research done is really difficult. So at the moment, there's an MSc that's just being finished, and they looked at land use change and change in the dam, what's being taken out of the dam. So they looked at aerial photography. I haven't looked at the MSc. It was in the geography department. So I'm really keen. She's about to hand it in. So that's the first piece of up-to-date research, and it's kind of more of a desktop study anyway, just to look at did the land use change over the last few years have any kind of an impact on the dam or not. So that'll be like a really broad scale answer. And then there's Westphalia and there's ZZ2 who have got enough capacity, who are measuring very, very carefully what their avos are using for irrigation purposes, because they need that for their accreditations and they need it to fine-tune their farming production. So we'd possibly, as they've moved up onto the mountain, be able to get more information from them, from what they've gathered themselves in their monitoring programs. But at the moment, we don't know for sure how much. We don't even know if a gum tree takes up more water and utilizes more water over its life than an avo does. They did a massive study in the Olifants catchment somewhere on that question, but the climate is completely different there. And then they looked at everything. They looked at, like, for this amount of water, and considering the jobs that you get and the market price you'd get for this product compared to a gum tree or a pine tree. And even that was convoluted, the answer. It seemed similar in some ways, but it depends on the climate. So no, we don't know.
No, cool. It was a question that I'd sort of asked, and you had alluded to it, but I thought that it needed a bit more elaboration. So thanks very much for that. There is another comment in the chat from Renuka. It's a link to a Google Docs form. So possibly, I'm not sure if that's intended for you specifically, Bronwyn, but maybe try and click. I think it's yeah. She says the aim of the CCC pilot is to create a community-governed carbon calculator and use it as a vehicle to transform industry sectors, business activities, and living lifestyles at the country level, including having direct impact on linked sectors such as agriculture, energy, water, transport, health, etc. You're invited to join the country carbon calculator pilot. So
Brilliant. Thank you.
And Marit says she will share it with you if you don't get a chance to click on it. But yes, I think we don't have any further hands up, and I think I have checked all of the questions or comments in the chat. So if no one else has any further questions, I just want to thank you again for your sort of passion and for taking care of these areas and for trying to make a difference. And we wish you all the best with your initiatives, and look forward to hearing good news and seeing grasslands restored and blue swallows returning and all of those things. I'm actually part of a group of birders who are coming to the Machubiskloof area for Birding Big Day on the 2nd of December. So 24 hours of birding. There's 4 of us, and we're hoping to get over 300 species. It's going to be quite a thing, but we'll be in your backyard. So
yeah, that's brilliant. Thank
awesome.
you. Thanks. Anyone who wants to come, please pop in. It'd be great.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll ask Maret to send me your number, and maybe we can contact, because we're doing a bit of a recce for the week ahead. I see Renuka has her hand up again, so let's give her an opportunity to chat.
No, thank you very much. It was really interesting to me, and especially looking at very small things, what you mentioned, like change in land use or whatever the questions were asked. I think that was brilliant. So if you can share your contact details with me, I've shared my contact details here, but if I can get in touch with you people, then that would be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I will. Thanks.
Thanks, Renuka. So yes, thanks everybody for joining us this evening, and thanks Bronwyn. And I'm sure many people will also watch the video. I think with as Johan said, lots of the students are studying for exams, so I'm sure, or I hope that we'll get some budding MSCs and other research projects done to assist you with the questions that have been asked.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Good night.